regards to the budget, Mr. Hewitt. I hope you're feeling better this morning. You're going to lead us this morning in this budget discussion.
Certainly. My remarks are, if that's a lateral to me to start.
Yes, sir.
Okay. My remarks are taken from the executive summary and beginning of part one in the budget message itself. And as a rack up, just point out that the total budget is $20,410,792. I'm sorry. Let me digress a moment. In the proposed budget that you have before you, I delivered the budget message prior to finding some administrative faux pas. Those administrative corrections have been made and amount to an overall reduction from the budget message in an amount of approximately $12,000. And those are primarily payroll deductions, those type of things. We did have some changes to the state retirement system. So from the budget message itself over to the proposed budget, those revisions have been included in the proposed budget. So the budget message itself, the proposed total budget is approximately $20,400,000. It represents a tax rate reduction, a proposed tax rate reduction of 2 cents from 22 to 20 cents, while achieving an established target range in the unassigned general fund of a minimum 40%, I believe it's about 42%, while satisfying all debt service and capital obligations of approximately $3.5 million across all funds. That's general, water, and sewer, along with our debt service on the Central Reach project. It provides funding for the rehabilitation of Lift Station 4 on the west end, while simultaneously or sequentially funding the engineering that is anticipated to be required for Lift Station 3, which is the lift station at the 800 block. It also escrows an amount of $3 million to the Beach Capital Reserve Fund for future nourishment projects, provides funding for a full dredge of all of the canals, which is 50,000 linear feet of waterfront here on the island, implementing House Bill 436, the water and sewer capacity fees, which will establish their own capital reserve funds separately for those fees in a water capital reserve fund and a sewer capital reserve fund. Provides proposed funding of merit-based performance of 3%. The first phase of the land use plan update is proposed funded in there, while expanding the Beach Ranger program as a follow-on to last year's initiation of that program, while partially funding Lockwood Folly Inlet Navigation Maintenance. Easement acquisitions for the SDI 5 permit are continued and rolled over, and it also funds the update for the Central Reach project permit using existing offshore sand resources. The third year, I think this is the third year, of the streets paving program, sand dunes, sandpiper, and sand spur is also funded in this proposed budget. Our schedule kicked off in the middle of January. It's matriculated through several meetings with the board, providing guidance, going over anticipated revenues and expenses. The budget message was delivered shortly after Labor Day on May 31st. It brings us to today's public hearing on June the 13th. And for the record, I haven't had any inquiries to the budget per se from the public at large. I don't know if the commissioners have gotten anything, but I haven't received any. The staff may have received some. But if that's the case, it hasn't been forwarded on to me. I've attempted to work in the commissioner's goals and objectives in the proposed budget. Those are detailed in the budget message itself. So that's where we are today as a leadoff. I believe that the next remaining or the proposed schedule is the consideration on the 19th. And again, since this is part of the budget process, y'all are not limited to, you can have as many continuing rolling workshops as you wish to make revisions to the proposed ordinance as you may see fit.
Okay, I have a question for you commissioners. The way the agenda is written, am I to understand that this is an opportunity for the public to speak and ask questions, or how do you want to proceed?
Public hearing.
All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I left out one thing. I talked about what the budget does. I neglected to mention that one thing I wanted to make sure that we got in here is that what the budget doesn't do, and we hear it every year whenever we look at our streets pavement management survey process and how that rolls into our capital improvement plan. This budget does not address, except in small sections, the Brunswick Avenue West situation. Now we have some pending draft solutions to that we won't be bringing back to the board until after July. But that is a programmatic that we anticipate bringing back to the board. So I just wanted to get that on the table, that we do not address that Brunswick Avenue West situation with the whoop-de-doo roller coaster down there. Sorry.
Okay. All right, then what we shall do, unless the commissioners tell me otherwise, we will now, this time, offer the podium to anyone that wants to begin the public hearing part of our meeting. This would give you an opportunity to make comments and raise questions for clarity in reviewing the proposed budget that has been offered to the public. Is there anyone that wishes to speak this morning? If so, come to the podium on my right, speak in the microphone, and say what's on your mind or ask your questions. Anyone? All right, Madam Clerk, if you will, make sure the minutes reflect that there were no speakers at the public hearing, and we'll consider the public hearing closed unless someone knows a reason why we can't. Okay, so now I guess as you look at the agenda, we are now number 3, review and possible action. Again, asking the commissioners, I guess that's your intention of time to vote on it. Is that what your intent is, or what?
Comment?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, what I'll remind everyone is that we did acknowledge that we had a revenue discussion, we had an expense discussion scheduled, but we never had revenue versus expense, and that this would be the opportunity at this meeting to have those kinds of discussions amongst the commissioners and with the town manager. So if we're going to have discussion, that's going to be what it's gonna cover, is now we have revenues, we have expenses, now we have to talk about anything we wanna discuss comparing the two. And ideas people might have that are different from what is in the budget message.
Does that mean that it gives me an opportunity to comment on the budget?
Yeah,
Okay. I just want to make sure.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Go for it.
You want me to go first?
I guess, because I don't know what,
I don't know.
I don't know what, I didn't know what you guys wanted to do, so whatever you want to do, I guess is what you want to do. I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk to the budget objectives that the commissioners had. And start off with tier one. The tier one goal was to establish beach renourishment and inlet management fund with $3 million from BPART. I did see the capital reserve fund in place in the budget, obviously after approval, right? But how soon will the funds be transferred into that account? How normally does that take?
1 July.
1 July, okay. And has the planning process been put in place in this budget to add additional funds each year to accomplish the agreed-upon $10 million capital reserve fund by 2026, which includes the $3 million? Is there any plan?
No, I don't know how to get to $10 million from where we are today.
Okay, but I thought we had stated that that was one of our goals and objectives to get to that point. And we can discuss that later. As a note on page 31, the Beach Nourishment Capital Reserve Fund will serve to alleviate financial burden in future years for sand projects, and is projected to receive funds from the general fund when the general fund balance reaches 70% or higher. And again, I'm going to ask my question, what plan is in place to obtain the 70% or greater goal, especially in this year's budget as a start? Do we have a plan?
This year's start was to use the 2-cent reduction in the tax rate, and basically that was the start that allowed the minimum fund balance in that fund balance ratio to be attained.
Not sure I
I mean, it was,
understand that.
it was, the overall goal there is to have a minimum of 40% and a maximum of 40%. That's the goal, and when you get to.
Minimum, maximum of 40%?
Yeah, a minimum of 40 and a maximum of 70.
70, you said.
And then-
Okay,
And
you
then-
said 40-40. Okay,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you get to 70, you move the overage over to the B-part fund.
And how would reducing the revenue from taxation help in that matter? You said reducing it 2 cents would help.
The general fund balance ratio is calculated as a function of resources available at the end of the year measured against the expenditures for the next year. When you reduce the expenditures for the next year, your general fund balance ratio increases.
And what expenses do you have lined up to reduce it?
You've reduced
Reduce the income.
No, you've reduced the expenditure of, which was the equivalent of 2 cents in tax transfer from the general fund over to the B-part fund to pay for the Central Reach project. Previously, you had transferred close to 7 cents over to the B-part fund, and then by virtue of reducing the tax rate and not transferring that money over to pay part of the debt, you've reduced the general fund, or, you've reduced on the expenditure side, and therefore you're increasing your general fund balance ratio.
But the effect was to draw down the B-part fund.
Mm-mm.
You're
No.
not drawing down the B-part fund because of that?
Oh, the unassigned B-part fund balance?
Yes.
That's where the monies will come from, was the unassigned B-part fund balance, not the set-asides that you've created in the beach capital reserve fund.
Right. And on the ratio, what effect does the expenses that we pay out of B-part fund have? If those expenses were out of the general fund, would it be a different ratio?
Oh, absolutely. It would drive the general fund balance ratio down.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the fact that we're paying those expenses out of the B-part fund is what allows us to have the ratio that we have.
Partially, yes.
Yeah, and that was one of our goals, not to Peter to pay Paul, basically, within the funds. So I understand what you're saying, 2%, but we haven't met the goals of the 10 million in 10 years, haven't met a lot of other goals. So,
Well, I mean, if we need to talk about the rational level of expectation, now's the time to do it, because getting, a penny is about $120,000 on your tax rate.
Yep.
And so if you're looking at, you got 3 million, you want to get to 10 million, you got 3 million, you're looking at 1.2 million is 10 cents on the tax rate every year for 7 years to get there, rough orders of magnitude, maybe 9 cents a year in tax penny equivalents.
so explain the logic then. If you decrease by 2 cents and you say we need 9 cents, that doesn't make any sense to me. I would, if anything, you'd propose increasing the tax by that amount,
Well, in
two
the
years-
previous discussions with the board, it was clear to me that proposing a tax increase was not to be on the table.
Absolutely, but, and it was, I don't think the majority looked to a tax decrease as well. But you do have some, some hefty loans that are gonna, 2 years, I think, can contribute to that.
I'm
10
sorry,
million.
I didn't.
You have some loans that are coming that will be paid off related to the sewer system in 2 years. That will, I think it's $660,000.
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to use water money to pay for sand. It's an enterprise fund, and the revenues that are coming from the water and sewer fund have to go toward the enterprise of water and sewer. You can't use that. Now, might it drive those rates down? Might that provide revenue for expansion of capital facilities? Yes. But you're not going to be able to use the water and sewer money to fund sand on the beach.
Okay. So then again, the 2 cents tax decrease makes 0 cents to me, because we have some obligations that we haven't met. But
So I guess this will be my opportunity, since I'm the person who proposed the 2% from the beginning. If you go back to the Central Reach project and the money we borrowed, I'll ask this simple question. After the board voted to raise the taxes to 22 cents, Hurricane Matthew came through, did terrific damage to the beach. After that happened, we were lucky enough to apply to FEMA for reimbursement, and we got close to $4 million. So I would ask you that if we change the chronology a little bit, so that $4 million was in our coffers when we decided to fund the Central Reach project, would we have needed a 22-cent tax rate? Or would you have voted for a 22-cent tax rate? Because there's always things that need money. My position is that the people of this community absorbed a tax rate to take care of the Central Reach. We were fortunate enough to get $4 million from the federal government, $3 million of which we've already allocated back to the B-Part Fund. So the B-Part Fund is sitting in the same place it was before the hurricane. And I think the people of the community should get back part of the money that they voluntarily agreed to pay in taxes. And I can always say that we can use more money, that we can spend more money, but is that our position? Is that the position we want to take, that as much money as we can get our hands on, we're going to allocate, or are we going to give back some of the money to the people who deserve it? It's a simple question of fairness, and whether the board made a feasible goal of $10 million or not. And just one step further, I think the people who pay the money are the people we should be concerned about, and not the potential homeowner 10 years down the line. So if we need to raise taxes at some point, we can do that. But in this budget, and if I could ask the town manager, if we have no unforeseen problems, for at least the next 1 or 2 years, the people in this town can be the beneficiary of 2-cent tax reduction. And I think that's not only fair, but it is sound policy, because we should not spend every nickel that's available just because it is available.
I can't disagree with that, the way you say it that way, of spending it. But my feeling, I have a responsibility to manage the resources of the town for the people that elected me. I tend to be a bit conservative. I don't want to spend all my money. I like to save some money. What we do if we drop and we give $100 back a year, that's $8.80 a month, to people that have a $500,000 house on the beach. That's how much they get back in the tax rebate or the reduction of taxes. That's going to take the B-Part fund down by $240,000 a year. That's a couple of $1 million between now and the time we pay off the B-Part fund debt. Right now, all of the money that comes into B-Part is paid out to pay off that debt. The $800,000 that the town has been transferring out of the general fund to the B-Part fund, which we did last year, is to pay other expenses of the town. 3 or 4 salaries, all the other expenses that go on, much to do with taking care of the beach and making the town livable. But if we bleed that B-Part fund down, and we reach a point 5, 6, 7 years from now that Mother Nature has let a little havoc out here on the beach, we're going to wish we had money. And I would prefer, and I'm a taxpayer, that would respond to me about $225 a year rebate on my house. I don't want it. I want to leave it in the savings account. I don't need that rebate. I'm sorry. 2 cents is not going to when you tax me, I don't like to be taxed more, but I'm not a big deal about getting a little bit back, just a little bit. It's $100 a year for a $500,000 house. So my view, and this is just mine, each of us has our own view, is that it would not be smart, it would not be responsible to cut the tax rate now, knowing that in near future, we're going to have to raise it back up. I would like to get through the next couple of years without raising taxes, managing our resources the best we can, having new houses come up, ad valorem taxes coming up, whatever's necessary, without doing it. But I would not be in favor of reducing the tax rate now, given the effect it's going to have on the B-Part fund.
Could I ask a question?
Can I inject before everybody gets staked out on a position? It may be beneficial for the board, if y'all could get a pencil out, I could go through. We talk about moving $3 million over into escrow. It begets the question of, well, how much is left in the B-Part fund? Okay, that, and I've done a quick and dirty calculation, so don't hold me to, rifle accuracy on this. And would bear your indulgence as I go through this. Last year, 30 June, we had a B Part fund balance of $6.45 million. And we're anticipating in the end of this year's budget that will end 30 June 2018. So the $6.45 million was a 30 June 17 balance in the B Part fund. And we're anticipating a roll-up surplus in the B Part fund 30 June 18 of $740,000. Okay. We've still had many of the reimbursements trickling in and a number of things. So we're going to have a roll-up surplus in the B Part fund of $740,000. That makes the balance of 30 June 2018 being right at $7.2 million. That number includes the county's escrow of our money at $1.444 million. That's still our money, but you gotta carve it out as it's assigned. So that takes us down to right at $575 million. Then you carve out another $3 million as a transfer to the capital reserve sand, whatever we want to call it. That gets us down to $2.75 million. And then we're appropriating another $347,000 in this year's budget. So that gets us down to being able to get your hands on cash an amount of $2.4 million. I think that's a number that y'all should consider, keeping in mind that the 2.4 is what you got in cash to get your hands on come 1 July. Also considering the fact that the county's got $1.4 million of your money that is going to be coming back to you in terms of cash flow over the next 8 years, right, 8 or 9 years, as the principal on the special obligation bond is retired. So anyway, offer that up for your consideration.
I have a question. So the tax increase, that doesn't cover the entire debt for the Central Reach, correct?
No, sir. The previous year's tax increase of 7 cents, or?
Correct.
No, sir.
So the other, what's the numbers? What are the, it covers what percentage, or what are the numbers that it does cover?
I didn't hear you, Peter.
What's the number that it does cover? So we're taking from the tax increase from the general fund over to pay for the debt. We also are taking monies from the B Part fund to cover the rest of that
Right.
debt, right?
That transfer was an amount equal to,
It was budgeted 806,000,
last year it was.
Yeah.
In this year's budget, it's
575,000.
575.
The 2 cent
560
reduction
something.
would drop it down by $240,000 or
Right.
more.
Yeah.
So, and
What he
in
said.
fact, if, we have felt responsibility to set some money aside for the beach renourishment and the inlet management.
Right.
All part of originally the B Part fund, but it kind of preserves and makes sure that we don't spend money on all the other expenses that we could spend. Pay raises, health care, whatever we happen to be, at the expense of having money available to take care of the beach. So we've set aside half of our B Part fund to say, this is to take care of the beach. Leaves us with 2.4 million, but if you draw it down again, $300,000, $350,000 a year for the next 3 or 4 years, there won't be any there. And then a board will have to say, then we can't afford to keep the sand fund, we're gonna have to give it back because we keep spending. We
Right.
can't quit spending it. So we spend about 800,000 more than the money that comes in, because the B-Part fund revenues annually pay the bill for the loan. A little bit better than pay the bill for the loan. So
And-
the 806 got spent, or got put in to pay other bills.
And you got to keep in mind too, that your enabling legislation on the B-Part fund stratifies how the occupancy tax has to be spent. And it's a 2-3 split. You collect 6 cents, you give the county a penny, 2 cents is for sand, and then 3 cents is tourism-related purposes, however that may be defined in the statute.
So basically, this budget doesn't have any additional, besides the transfer of 3 million into the sand fund. So, you know, again, that's, and then the general fund, we're at the minimum as well. And to your point, Mike, I agree, we shouldn't be, to me, it's, 10 million is halfway there. To me, I use that number as a balance, because I think the next central breach, instead of 15, is going to close to 20. We can anticipate that in 10 years. So, you know, I'm not looking to save the entire 10, so I think it would be a split between current and future homeowners absorbing that cost. So rather than having to go into a very large debt, we'd have at least half of the fund in a fund balance. And that's, I think, is a goal. We might not make it, but I think it's a goal worth working for.
I will ask the same question that I asked 10 minutes ago. If we had the $4 million in the coffers of the town when we voted on the current tax rate, I don't think that the town manager would have presented a 22-cent tax rate. We would have had that $4 million in hand. And so now, what we're looking to do is take the excess money, the money that we were given by the government, and not reimburse the taxpayer. And I just don't see, we're taking you kind of riffed right over the fact that we're taking $3 million. So if you take the 3 million and the 2.4, then in essence, we have $5.4 million available today for sand. Today, 5.4 million.
Or you can't spend the rest of that for sand. That has to be on tourism,
We have $5.4 million, right?
but we can't spend it all on sand.
Not all of it, but not all of it.
40%
And
you
what-
can.
Okay. And what I'm proposing is that with the money we have, with the extra money that came to the town, we lower the tax rate. And for the, I don't know how many times, John, I'm not proposing that we do it for 8 years. I'm not proposing we do it for 5 years. I'm proposing we do it this year. And if we can do it again next year, then we do it again. If there comes a point in that continuum where we cannot allocate the 2% tax rate, then we go back to 22 cents, or we go back to whatever the need may be. But right now, the economics of it, the way I look at it, it's quite clear that the town can afford to give it a tax reduction, and they'll be able to do that again next year. And it's not going to jeopardize whether or not we can take care of a catastrophe, because that money's going to be sitting over there. You're taking $240,000, not 350, as you just said a couple of minutes ago, $240,000.
If you look at the budget, it's $347,000 coming out of the B-Part fund
But it's not
for
all,
expenses
It is-
and the 240.
it is not all
No.
from the taxes. $240,000 is the tax reduction.
And 130 is other expenses that exceed the B-Part fund.
Has nothing to do with the tax reduction.
No, it doesn't.
Has nothing to do with it. We're talking about $240,000 this year, possibly next year, possibly the year after that. I mean, I think we've discussed it any number of times. That's my position. I understand your position. Somewhere next week, we'll vote on it.
Can I continue with my narrative? If you're gonna start it? Okay. I didn't see anything pertaining to parking in the budget, but, you know, we said that phase one would be X number of things that we would accomplish, putting parking bumpers out, paint stripes, trying to get the parking a little bit more organized. And I gotta thank you guys and for putting out the new parking bumpers and that, but I still notice people parking every other which way out there. I don't know what it takes other than, you know, hey, you know, it's incredible to me. But anyhow, as we finished the season, we said that we would assess and evaluate phase one at the end of the season, and then consider possibly phase two being the usage of any, and developing any town-owned property to create additional parking. Phase three would be going on the other side of the line in the sand, which would be possibly considering other options such as paid parking. And that. So we have a plan in place. Let's just continue with the plan. Tier two. Tier two goal was to increase the general fund and B-part fund reserves without transfers from other accounts. It appears that we are close to having a minimum general fund balance of 40%, while other municipalities are closer to the maximum, and some are exceeding 70%. In last year's general fund narrative, there was a benchmark statement that the average fund balance for North Carolina towns with populations such as ours was 132%, with a median of 100%. And these are just things that I've noticed, you know, within the budget. The other thing that was in this tier two objective was employee compensation review. I know we haven't had one yet, but do we have any plans to review employee compensation prior to the close of this budget? Is a question.
Are you talking about the proposed budget?
Yeah, yeah. Right.
May I?
Sure.
This is our opportunity to do that. It has been raised at 2 separate meetings, and it was always deferred. So if there needs to be a discussion of employee compensation, it must be a public discussion. And so if there is going to be such a discussion, now is the time to have it, Joe.
Okay.
But we don't have the facts in this budget of the,
Okay, well, again, these are the times to ask the questions of the additional data. We did get the information on salary ranges and salaries.
Yeah,
But this is the time to ask the question. We have deferred it twice.
Right, I
So
agree,
this is the
I agree.
last opportunity, unless we want to have another meeting we call between now and the 13th, or the next week, to discuss only that topic, having already addressed questions to David about what additional information you need.
yeah, so the range is fine, but I think we need to have the
It's
real
what-
data.
It's what you're asking for is to have a classification and pay plan study performed? Is that what you're asking for?
I'm asking for a review of the compensation package. That's what I'm asking for, to include insurance, as an example.
Yeah, the best way to do that is to have an external consultant come in and provide that information to you.
Well, we don't have time for that, but, and we've kicked this can down the road a couple budgets, actually.
Well, I mean, these goals were set up for next year's budget. That was my understanding. That's what these goals were for, not in order to implement next year's budget.
You're
Was
confusing
your
me
intent
because
to- was your intent
some
to-
of them you've put in this budget and some of them you haven't, so.
Right, was your intent to have an employee compensation study performed prior to implementing this budget? That's kind of a big deal to
Totally. The one page you show the min, max, and meet, I'd like to see where do our employees fall within them, at the minimum? You didn't give any employee data in that.
We gave them the salaries on that. Yeah, we provided the individual salaries.
Yes.
I think we have them and where they are with within the range.
Okay.
We got that.
Pretty much the employees are at the mid-range of those classifications. And that was updated in 2015.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Does the maximum always move to the 3%?
I'm sorry?
The 3% figure, does the maximum of that range always move 3%? Or does it move
What-
on an
The
annual
range,
basis?
does the range move annually?
The range does not move annually. The individual moves inside of that range. And, over time, I mean, the reality is that the market outstrips the range. In those circumstances where, and they're limited, very limited, where an employee moves to the edge, to the maximum in the range, they just don't keep growing beyond the range, and they're awarded a bonus based on, but their salary is still, stays at the maximum of the range. And periodically, I review those ranges to make sure that in those isolated circumstances, that the employee's not getting penalized because the range is moving. I mean, the reality is ranges may not be moving, in the market, but due to longevity, past performance, that employee is near the edge of the maximum of the range. But, we just recalibrated back in 2015, and I'd say 95% of employees are right at the midpoint of those ranges.
Does a government agency set those ranges periodically?
No, that's derived from a data set, and a in-house salary survey that we perform in-house here.
So you yourself set the range?
I set those ranges, yes, sir.
Okay.
Do you benchmark? Do you use other municipalities to benchmark?
The benchmarks that we use are straight up from the League of Municipalities survey data, salary survey data across North Carolina.
Okay.
I mean, we look really hard at those. Plus, not only do we look at those in-house, but we ground truth those results with other municipalities that actually recently have had external consultants come in and do the same type survey. We're pretty spot on. We probably saved the town about $20,000 on doing it in-house.
Mhm. Okay. Good.
And
Sounds like you have a process.
the merit raise, is that an amount that then you decide which employees might get a raise and which ones would not? Or is it everybody gets a 3% raise?
It's on an individual basis. Individual merit raise and evaluation is performed.
And does this 3% include your salary?
In this year's calculation, I think we just did a bubble program on it, and in that administration, it was 3%.
What do you mean, what does that mean, a bubble?
We took the salaries in there and multiplied them by 3%.
But I said, is your salary included?
My salary's in there.
And was your salary raised last year when we did the 3%? So this wouldn't raise your salary?
No, I don't get a salary increase
Unless the board-
until the board approves it.
But so therefore, it's not really 3%, it's more than 3% because they're using your salaries in there.
If your salary was in the pool?
Yeah,
I view your salary, like you're saying, as separate from,
right.
you work for the board, the other
Right.
folks work for you. So I would remove that.
Okay.
Um,
We did that same thing last year and moved it. from the total.
Okay.
But that's an easy programming thing to remedy.
Sure. Well, while we're talking 3%, just so happens, you know, that health insurance looks like it was a 3% raise from the health insurer. Has there been any discussion of a more shared employee, shared of that cost increase? Because, you know, right now, you know, my wife works for the county. The county pays $8,500 per person, and we pay over $14,000 per person for health and benefits.
To answer your question, yes, we look at that every year, and as a matter of fact, have increased those deductibles every opportunity we can, so the burden is paid for on the employee side. Heather, you want to add into that?
Is that on the family portion or on their individual portion?
On the family side.
On the family side?
The individual portion is paid for fully by the town, and the employee pays.
No
a
deductible,
percentage.
okay. But the families are what, 20%? Or what,
Roughly.
Correct.
right, 20% for the family?
And you know, I know the county, it's flipped. It's 80% the families pay. You know, I know I pay it, so. The other question is, so are you telling me the 3% increase is being at least partially absorbed by the employees?
Right, we increase the deductibles based on the percentage, so what we're doing is you would evaluate it each year, and it would be 20% of whatever that cost increase is. The whole amount's being, 20% would go to the town, 20 to the employee. I'm
I
sorry,
get
the
it.
increase, the 3% would go to the employee and to the town, so it's split based on the percentage. If that makes sense, what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That makes
it does,
sense.
it
That makes
does.
sense. Yeah.
But
Yeah, the county insurance and all the folks that work within the county, it's a large population. Are we in that group, or would it behoove us to look at what benefit it would be to go into that group?
Matter of fact, you're talking about Brunswick County's plan?
Yeah.
Brunswick County has actually had implemented a self-insure program here several years back, and as a matter of fact, they're getting out of that and are going with a provider. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Brunswick County at one time, during that time where they were self-insured, was not providing for family care insurance. And in this year's budget, I don't know the particulars, so I'm speaking from, you know, what I get out of the newspaper. They are actually moving toward reopening that for certain family members. I don't think that answers your question. Can we get in Brunswick County's pool? That's since we're a separate local government entity, that's an insurance provider's call there. I don't think so, but I mean, just like the school system is a separate entity from the county.
Yeah, I did read something in the paper on this, and I thought that they had indicated in the newspaper that the employees or the county or somebody felt as if this new program that they were going into would better the employees, be better for the employees. So I was just wondering if we could check that out and see whether or not it's better benefits or are they worse? And
well, bottom line, though,
And we do a rack up every year, you know, beginning in February, we solicit insurance companies for their prices every year. I mean, we market compete them in every year. Right now, we're Blue Cross and Blue Shield is where we are.
how
And,
long have we been with Blue Cross Blue Shield?
like 3
3 years?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had changed from United sometime in the past, and you know, some of the things that we had seen previously, you know, you get you get the bait and switch where they buy in low, you switch, and then the next year they jump up 20%. We haven't seen that with Blue Cross over the course of the last 3 years. There have been, incremental increases, but nothing spectacularly awry like we had seen in the past whenever you get the cable TV switch offer kind of thing sometimes.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, we're asking the employees to pay a percentage of that 20%, and that stays 20%. So if they go to another insurance company, it's still gonna be 20%, which I'd argue is not in line with the rest of the world. Definitely not the county, definitely not the industry. It's
Well,
not even close.
there are other locations that provide, I don't have the specifics on that, but there is a data set that speaks to how insurances are provided across North Carolina. Just remember, part of, if what you're proposing is a reduction in those employee benefits, part of recruiting, the labor force that you have here was that compensation package, which was insurance. And for a long time, I apologize.
Hello?
But what I'm saying is the cost sharing needs to adjust. Because
I'm sorry.
What I'm saying is that cost sharing for family health insurance needs to adjust to the real world. It is absolutely not in the real world right now. And I'd like to, so we're talking things, 2% tax and everything. I would not vote for this budget without some changes. I would absolutely not vote for this budget. And we've talked about some of the changes that need to take place, so, and that's one of them, in my opinion.
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Mayor. How does the board go about asking the town manager to change some element of the budget?
Y'all tell me. Y'all don't ask me, y'all tell
But
me what it
Do
is.
we take individual items and then vote on them, or?
You just tell him what you want him to do.
But the
You're-
board
you're
has to
his
do it in
boss.
total, not individually. It has to be a board decision. So it takes a vote on each item?
Any way you wanna do it.
Okay.
You can do it by consensus. Go down a list of items, you get a consensus on each one,
Yeah,
or
okay.
vote directly if you want.
Yeah, because it's just, going back to general fund balance, going back to everything, it's just strangling us the way, if we're always gonna do things the way we've done it, we'll never get to the 100% where we should be on the general fund balance, we'll never get to money where we should be on the B part fund balance. It's just, we have to make some fundamental changes for us to, get to where we should be on the very important line items, not just, paying our expenses. But because, the general fund balance of it should be 100%, and that's because we live in a community that you need, if there's something that came, storm that came through here, our 40% wouldn't get us very far, as you know.
Well, can I comment on that? Your fund balance policy that was established last year, when you say that the general fund balance should be 100%, your fund balance policy should be whatever you deem it to be, that it needs to be. And your policy that you adopted last year deemed it to be minimum of 40, maximum of 70. Now, if y'all want to do something different than that, you should change your fund balance policy in order to arrive at
But it was
that.
40 last year, and it's still 40 this year, so.
No, that was, that's the.
It's what? 34? Oh,
That's the unassigned fund balance. The fund balance last year was something else. It was not, you did not meet your minimum of 40% last year.
yeah, I didn't catch it. What's the exact number?
It's in the message, but it's 44.
44,
We
okay.
have met our range this year.
Right. But you were not in the range last year.
So maybe a range is the wrong way of looking at it. I expected that every year we'd get closer to 70%, and to me, 70% is a minimum. You know, like we, you know, if you benchmark, it's 100%. So that was, I expected every year to get closer to that 70%, and
Well, you adopted the fund balance policy in August of 17, is when you adopted that policy, after you had passed the budget last year, if I remember correctly.
I thought it was sooner than that, but we'll,
Now, it was discussed, but the actual adoption, please correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah,
I
okay.
believe,
It was discussed like we're discussing
Yeah.
things right now, right?
I mean, during the course of the budget, it was discussed, and then the policy was adopted in August of 17 as going forward, I think, was where we got to.
Yeah, so again, my point is, I'll bring up the 2 cents. We're taking money out of the general fund to pay for the loan for Central Reach. If we didn't do that, then we could get closer to that 70%, which I think we should get to as soon as possible, because that catastrophe is, you know, as we all know, could be right around the corner. But go ahead. Go ahead,
But for me, one of the issues that we need to attack is the 2 cent reduction in taxes that's in the budget.
Yep.
And I move that we delete that from the budget message and from the budget, proposed budget.
So,
That
Well,
we
hold-
don't,
can I-
that we do not reduce
I-
the tax rate.
I need to interject something here. The budget message is what the budget message is. What you guys would be acting on is the budget ordinance at this point in time. That's what you're talking about. Okay?
so it's gonna change from the budget message, you're saying?
No, the budget
Where-
message is in the rear view at this point in time. And it's what the proposed budget ordinance that's in front of you has been derived at. What your action is the proposed budget ordinance. So if you want to change that, that's what your action is on.
Okay,
It's not semantics. The
No, I
budget
understand.
message has to be delivered by
Yep.
June first. The budget ordinance has to be adopted by July first.
Yeah. It's a dated document after it's delivered.
So, I would-
May I make, okay, as I sit and listen, and this is my first time through all of this, but again, I've sat through an awful lot of budget discussions in my time. We seem to be, this needs to change, this needs to change. We're setting individual targets and not a coherent, which frequently is sort of, it's sort of normal. But when we're talking about B-part and sand, and where's the plan? We have a new committee, which I think part of the committee's responsibility is going to be to define where are we going, how are we getting there, where are there different opportunities for funding, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something that will happen this next year. The cost of insurance, and we all know cost of insurance has gotten more reasonable. It's not 20% increases, but should there be a change? That is something, again, if we want to do that, that takes some time to do that review. It might be something that has to be done this next year. Do you really want to try to do something between now and the following week? Again, knowing that we have deferred this discussion perhaps a month longer than we should have. We should have been having this discussion, and we did deliberately defer it, remember. So that's another piece. You know, I see the tax reduction Mike's way after going through it many, many times, that there is a justification for, his justification is an appropriate justification. Now, the consideration is whether or not this is going to hurt our long-term plan. And at the moment, I would say that we have a lot of long-term plans that we need to make, and this might be what this next year is about. So I'm also weighing it in terms of, we have to come up with some plans is it going to actually hurt us for 1 year to give that money back, knowing we have the right to raise taxes if we have to, if our long-term plan that we come up with says that? So I'm trying to have a coherent overall everything and not one thing at a time. And I would just ask everybody to try to consider that, given that we have basically a couple weeks left to approve an ordinance, and that some of the things are complicated and probably need some more time than we have to sort them out. But I'm trying to keep an overall coherent, where are we? Are we better off than we were a year ago? 4% better in general fund, 40 to 44, it continues to grow. Do we always have to wait until we get to 70, or is there some, as long as we are continuing to improve that balance and fund the sand fund, that will be adequate instead of, there's a lot of considerations to make. So I'm just asking everybody to try to keep, an overall picture in mind of improvement and growth and fund increases against where we are today and what we're planning for next year.
And I don't disagree.
Let me talk. And I think personally that I'm doing that, and I've done that. I've gone through the budget, and I'm pointing out specifics that are either in the budget, or not in the budget, but this allows me time to request an answer also as well, to the questions and some of my concerns. And I have other things on my list that I'd like to continue. Can I do that now?
Hold on,
Okay.
1 second. John asked, we talked to the mayor about how we're gonna communicate this to the town manager, what changes we wanna do. So I think the smartest way is to do it by individual requests. Is that,
I think we could move along. If there's different things we wanted to decide, to advise the town manager, we could do that.
and I agree with you, some things are more complicated and we should probably, but some things are not.
No, but I would not vote on any one thing until we have a full list
Okay,
of,
fair enough.
that's what everything.
Then go back and vote on the list.
And then vote on,
individually.
not do one thing and wait until there's a full list that everybody agrees,
Okay.
and then we will vote on it, one item at a time, but when the full list is there.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry, that's kind of what I meant when I
Okay.
went on to my ramble.
Okay, no problem. Okay, keep on going.
Good. And we also know that the waste, solid waste, the advisory group implementation from the February report, and David, that was a fantastic report. And, we probably should have discussed this, and I know that Pat has requested in August that we're gonna discuss this a little bit further. But in the last meeting that we discussed this, we talked about money in, money out, or something like that. Is there gonna be any notation in this budget for that?
No.
No? Okay, so we're just gonna
But if
let it
I,
roll.
Other than current services,
yeah, but that's because there's no change,
there's no change.
there's no change,
Okay.
right? So it's the same.
Okay, so you answered my question, thank you. Are there any funds going to be available in this budget for the engineering process of lift station 2 and 3?
Three.
Is that in there?
Three.
Is
Lift
that in
station
there?
3. Yes, sir.
Okay, I
For
missed
lift
it.
station 3.
Okay. Okay. So that's in the budget?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. Land use plan. I don't know whether I'm bringing up a sore subject here or what, but is there any potential to review the land use plan? And are there any funds available to update this plan?
First phase.
First phase?
Yes, sir.
And that money is in the budget? Okay.
And what does that entail? Phase
Land use plan, Tim, you want to chime in here? I mean, I can maybe answer. Oh, what all's entailed in updating the land use plan?
What's involved in updating.
Mhm.
You're probably gonna have to have outside consulting. We're going to be, reaching, the planning board, the staff inside the building. We're going to be touching on every department and everything within the town in order to update this land use plan. There's gonna be a whole lot of data that comes in, and then it's gonna be filtered and put into the plan. But we're probably not gonna be able to do it in-house. It's gonna have to be, some exterior component to it to do it, because it is wrapped around a lot of, rules and regulations about how you put the plan together.
Yeah, we had heard that, and we just wanted to make sure that that's
It's in
budgeted,
there.
that outside.
Yes.
Yes, yes, that's
services.
in the professional services.
Right, okay.
In my budget.
What we're anticipating was, and we've already done some preliminary outreach and got confirmation from the Council of Governments who provides that type service on a regular basis to do that for us. And it's not just the planning board and the staffs here. There's actually a large committee that's established as representative of the community that goes through that process. And because there's outreach goals that have to be accomplished as part of that update.
I went through the plan, well done. A lot of work has gone into that.
It's actually about 10 years old, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
It's time
I
to
tell
do
you,
it.
some folks spend a lot of time doing it. And, okay, I'm down to tier 7 on our goals, and that's to maintain/increase B-part fund coupled with a 2-cent tax decrease. My comments here are, without having a rock-solid financial justification and explanation for a 2-cent decrease in our current tax structure, I cannot in good faith support the tax decrease. The 2-cent deduction amounts to $100 annual reduction for a home assessed at $500,000, or $8.33 per month. As stated on page 9 of the budget message, this would result in a reduction of revenue in the amount of $241,686. The last thing we need to do is decrease the tax rate by 2 cents and then possibly turn around in the future and request an increase. As many of you can remember, we had a 7-cent increase to support the Central Reach project 2 years ago. If anything, let's all agree to have an organized process, a plan in place to prevent another tax increase. We can also agree that costs are not going down, as we experienced with an increase in project costs for lift station number 4. It's only a matter of time before we have to fund Central Reach project number 2. There are just too many unknowns to include sales tax estimated to be reduced by 2% due to the county's revenue going down. I suggest we are better served by maintaining the current tax rate and focus on the major priorities that will help the solvency of our town. Think sand and additional revenue sources, and possibly reducing expenses. The budget process and the format is difficult for me to review and understand. I'm normally used to seeing a comparison between the years. And in this particular budget, I see a budget of numbers. If I go back to the last budget, I see the same numbers. It's difficult for me to understand how we can incorporate always the same numbers. If we're using outside services and that number doesn't change, I have a tough time believing that that number won't change, because everybody's looking for an increase these days. So it's a comment I have, and in the future I suggest, number one, that we start this process earlier in the year. It needs to start a lot earlier. We need to discuss this a lot earlier and not get to this particular point in time. And I'd want to see comparisons in previous years to help me understand that the numbers are what they are. Are they going up? Are they going down? Are they favorable? Are they unfavorable? And those are my comments. Thank you.
I have a few individual. Is there somewhere, where is the pipe testing line item, David?
It come out of E&R water. When we started doing that, we actually approved to do 3 rounds. Last year was our 3rd round, so it doesn't have anything in there this year.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay,
Now, whether or not we want to reinstitute that,
later on.
Later
Well, I mean,
on.
We did 3 rounds, I think that's a sound decision, yep. Can we talk a second about donations? Where does that list come from, and
That's based on requests that we've gotten, and from past requests. Those are submittals that come in to us throughout the year. Excuse me.
and I see, for example, a women's club has $1,000 and the beautification has 500. Is that what they requested, or is that?
That's what they've requested.
Okay. They need to update the request, it sounds like. I think you've answered my questions. Well, actually, the trucks, I understand that there's, for Chris's group, 3 trucks are gonna be added? Is that, am I calculating that correctly?
Is it 2 or 3? 2.
2?
Yeah.
2 this year? Okay.
You're looking at CIP or the,
Wouldn't that be under the capital plan?
Yeah, capital. Okay. Then I'm a little confused about capital outlay on the police side, 64,921. But then there's another fund balance appropriation of 34,977 for a vehicle.
yeah,
So-
what that is the police vehicle, that's really one vehicle and a third, if you will. The third is the last of the lease year payments that we have there's a lease purchase on that. The other lion's share of that is a outright cash purchase of it. That outright cash purchase was actually budgeted this year, but we didn't feel like that the buy time on it was right. We thought we'd get a better deal, so we didn't purchase it this year, and are rolling a portion of those funds over in order to secure it this year. And we didn't have to, when you net everything out, we didn't have to appropriate the full amount.
Okay.
I noticed in the previous budget pertaining to the police vehicles that we have $49,000 in there in the budget. But for the next, I think it's 7 years, there's no purchase of any vehicle?
And, we go on what Chief Lane has projected as far as needing to re-up those. So we should be good once we get this year's vehicle, probably, for another 3 years, Chief, before we need to buy any vehicles at all.
But in here, it says 0 for the next 7 years, I think. Yeah, 6 years, the next 6 years.
So now you're talking the capital plan.
The capital plan, yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe you want to look at that and revise that.
Now, you're talking about revising the capital plan, not before the budget is adopted, before the end of the year, but you're making that as a suggestion to include for next year's considerations, as far as what we need to do, because what we'll need to do in order to do that is we need to do an assessment on the fleet, is what we'll do.
Okay. You just can't take the advice of the chief?
Well, Chief's a real good fellow, but I like to actually do vehicle mile counts and things like that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I just find that over the next six years that they're not going to need an additional vehicle or replaced.
Got a pretty new fleet, sir.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, okay. All right,
But noted, we will.
yeah, I appreciate that, thank you.
I have a question about the new assistant town manager's position. Is that?
That was one of the faux pas that we made from the original budget message to the changes in the proposed ordinance.
Okay, so what does that change then? What?
It was about, I think we had, In the budget message, it was about 53, and it drops down to about 50 in there.
Right. But does that position get overtime?
No.
Okay.
So it's probably a net loss for her.
I guess your question was, it was in the budget,
Right.
but then the new budget that David sent us, it wasn't in, it was taken
Right,
out.
right,
Yeah.
right.
I backed it out.
Good catch.
There's also professional services, mainland and beach for 18,500. In B part,
Yeah,
what is that?
the mainland side's for anything that we have to do with turkey trap, that if we have to do anything over there with permitting, or, if we have to end up using that site, so we try to keep money in there for that purpose, because we do have that site as a permitted sand
Yep.
source.
We- We also have an ongoing bond that we have to maintain for that facility over there. To keep that permit in play, we have to maintain a bond. So that's an expense, it's carrying cost.
Okay.
But that's not the only thing in that line, I'm sorry.
Okay, those things. So typically, all you do is bond unless we have to do something with this, right?
Is there liability insurance involved in that too?
Our liability insurance is, through the league, and all of our facilities are
And that's in there.
are included, and then they're dispersed throughout each of the funds depending on what the facilities that are covered. What funds are in which facilities are in each fund, excuse me.
Cool.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Any other commissioners got comments, questions? Are we through with,
Number 3?
three, I guess, and ready to continue discussing possible action on the audit committee's recommendations? Is that where we are?
Well, our,
No,
Wait a second.
sorry, Mr. I think where we are now is that we've been through the discussion, and there are some items on the table that people may want to have the ordinance changed. And if I have this correct, the things on the table are the 2-cent reduction, the 3% merit increase on salary with the removing the town manager's salary from that calculation. And correct me if I've missed something.
Right.
And the third one was the raising the benefits and the cost to employees being increased. Were those, was there something, Joe, you've been through this, were there others that had an actual ask to the town manager to change things? And I would say on the benefits, more cost to employees, there has to be a target provided, not just a request to change it. There's got to be some sort of, what number are you looking for? This is my opinion, that, you have to give the town manager a number that you're looking to save or to change. So I think those are the three, correct?
Well, maybe I'm still stuck on this 70, getting to this 70% and having additional, in dollars in the general fund. I don't know how we can include that, because I'm still interested in being able to put additional funds in this new fund that we have, the capital reserve fund. And I understand what you said, let's leave it up to the committee, but I think the committee needs some guidance and direction from us too as well. And this was one of our primary goals and objectives.
Well, it's pretty clear there's only one or two ways to do that. You either increase revenue or you decrease expenses. You want that thing to go up, you want it to grow, you've got to put the money in the bank. You've got to quit spending, or you've got to raise revenues.
So I think that was my closing statement, that we need to look at ways of increasing our revenue and reducing expenses. Thank you.
Well, hopefully the new homes that get built on the beach will in fact generate some revenue
Oh,
for
yes,
us.
I should.
And hopefully in time, we get some bills paid off, that we won't have to be paying big capital expenses on loans. But that's gonna be 5 or 6 years before that happens.
Yeah, so there's been no progress towards reducing expenses.
Well, now, in the past, we've taken some deliberate actions on refinancing facilities. You know, we've refinanced the new town hall, and we've refinanced some of our sewer debt. So there has been those types of things. You know, as long as fuel costs what fuel is, I mean, costs are going up. If what you're talking about is turning lights off, you know, on street lights, those are the types of things that, you know, if that's what you're talking about, you know, I get requests in here every day for additional street lights, you know, so those, we had a 15% increase in the, you know, street lights replacement program that just
But that you
occurred.
just passed along to the taxpayers, correct? That increase,
No, the town gets billed for those street lights.
okay? So we absorbed that increase?
Mhm.
Okay.
Those are all LEDs, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
So wouldn't it be a decrease?
You might get a decrease in the electricity, but you gotta remember
They're
that
brand new. You bought
you,
Brand new.
you got to pay for that depreciation on the pole.
Okay, so
I
the
mean,
following
that's-
year that would come down, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll come down because they probably straight line their depreciation.
Yeah,
It's a
but my
utility.
point, this year, we went, if we do a 4% increase into the general fund, it's gonna take us years to get to just 70, years.
Well, I'm gonna talk to that because that's the unassigned fund balance. And the 40% that was referenced, I believe that was the gross fund balance in the previous year. I would have to check to see exactly what the unassigned fund balance from last year was, what that ratio was. I'd have to double check that for you. I don't know, somebody mentioned 40 to 44%.
Right, your accountant there.
Well, I'm the budget officer, I'm the one that calculates the fund balance ratio. I'd have to calculate that, I'd have to check that, matter of fact, it's a pretty easy check. If you let me run upstairs, I can go get the audit from last year, and it's a readily available number.
You can do that, but it's,
Right.
you know, it's the trend that we want to be
Right.
much, much greater, you know, before we do anything. We have to have a B part fund balance and a general fund balance that is healthy, and we're not there.
And Peter, I agree with you, we want to see growth. What's your target? Because again, it's like there has to be a target to hit. You want to see it grow 10% a year? You know, as soon as possible I understand it's nebulous. So again, we need to be more precise in what we're asking for, I believe. So I know, I don't want to pin you down today, but it's like, what's the Board of Commissioners' target for increase? Do we want to get to 70% in 3 years? And then is it possible? But we have to be more precise here.
Yeah. But you understand it's not precise when we need it. So, if something happens, we're gonna need that money next month. So,
You know, I'd even believe that, you know, let's ask David also, you know, because he's dealt with this a number of years, you know, what's realistic, what can we achieve? You know, get some guidance and direction here.
It depends
I
on
don't
what.
know, I don't know, I'm out of order asking.
Be careful what you ask for, because I'm gonna say it depends on what you want to put on the table and how fast you want to get there. If you want to talk about a tax increase, you want to talk about sending people home and stopping doing particular services, we can, you know, we
Those are
can
all
talk about.
options. Those are all options.
If, those are all options, okay?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anybody talking about a desire for decrease of service at all. Everybody wants the same level of service or better. You know, we're facing some increased demands for automation on a daily basis that are soon going to outstrip our in-house capabilities, whether that be for IT or just to be able to maintain in the digital world. I just use as an example. You know, there's not any less people going to come here. We're going to have more people coming here. You've got about 1,000 lots on the island that are not built out. Those are going to require, you know, services, not only for the services that you currently deliver, but also additional services that new people are going to want. You know, how fast do you want to increase those fund balances? Where do you want to get to? You know, do you want to entertain taxing to get there? You know, a penny's $120,000. That's about 5% of the projected expenditures in the general fund next year. If you want to grow it 10%, I'm sorry, it's not 5%. I think that general fund expenditure is about $3.2 million. You know, your delta needs to be about, if you want to go 10%, your delta on the revenues and expenses needs to be about $320,000 a year. That's, you know, 2.5 cents. Where does that revenue come from? Sure, some of it's going to come from increased tax base at the current tax rate, that kind of thing. Increased sales and use taxes, possibly. You also should keep in mind that the landscape on state distributed revenues, which your special obligation bond is directly tied to and secured through, is changing at the same time. Every year we see legislation introduced to change a number of those state distributed revenues. The biggest of those, for us anyway, and the most frequently targeted is the sales and use tax. Again, you have no control over those state distributed revenues.
So Pat, on your list, I'd like to clarify, one of them is the health insurance is up 3% on top, of the merit. I'd like to, have a vote or
It's on there.
consensus.
When I said benefits, more cost to
Yeah.
employees,
Okay.
but, yeah.
And one of the things is just the town not absorb any of that 3% increase as a start. One way to start that. But I'm good otherwise. So do we want to go through your list?
Is everybody done?
We want, yeah.
Were you finished? I'm sorry. I just had a question. To the 2 cent matter, and this is strictly at a technical level on my part now, concerning the 2 cent, putting that 2 cent back into the budget. Would you want to see that go in, because it's going to come in on the revenue side? Would you want to see that go into basically a contribution to fund balance on the general fund side? Or would you see that being transferred over to the B part fund to pay the B part fund debt? It's important the way we do that.
I thought you were gonna say the sand fund, but.
Well,
Well, to
I
the
mean,
B part.
ultimately,
To the B part.
you know, if you, now you can do that. You can make did we write that capital reserve fund up that it can receive funds directly from the B part, from the general fund, Mandy?
So, except, I think that states that you can, but I think it has to be if the general fund, fund balance is 70%.
So I would
Well-
propose splitting it, David, because we're not, those two fund balances are not what's needed. So I would split it between that sand fund that you just seeded with the 3 million, and then I'd also put it in, half of it in the general fund balance.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, those two are not where we want it to be, and if they were, I'd say definitely.
Do we have to make that decision today?
If
Yeah, we have
if
to
I'm gonna
give
put
Dave-
it,
give
if I'm
David
gonna put it in the
direction.
budget, you,
I like the sand fund.
Well,
And I'd go along with either,
I
sand is
I just
fine.
need to know.
I think you have to break that down into two different votes. You're assuming that I'm gonna lose this vote. So first you
I'm
have,
sorry.
first you have to
Yeah,
vote
okay.
whether or not you're gonna take the 2-cent reduction out of the budget. Then you have to decide, if
Fair
you
enough,
do
Mike.
take it out of
Fair
the
enough.
budget, how you're gonna do it.
Fair enough. Okay,
Should I make the motion?
well, we just need to go down our list. Can we start your list now? We'll get a consensus on each item on the list, Pat?
Okay. Let's start with the easy one. Did we all agree that in terms of merit increase, which was 3%, that the town manager's salary be removed from the overall total that the 3% is calculated on?
Yes.
Yes.
That's consensus.
Consensus.
Yeah, I got that.
Benefits, specifically health insurance. The proposal is that the town not absorb any of the increase that was to be split this year between the employee and the town, that the town allow the employee to pay for the entire increase. Is that correct?
Yeah, so
That was
that's-
6% instead of 3%.
so it modifies your 20% rule of thumb, I guess.
Well, it would not only do that, but it would take, there's about 10 employees out of 24, so they'd be taking the increase of the entire town, the ones that do
Do the what?
the ones who have spouse or family or children would be taking the 3% increase overall for those people also.
It would be the
So-
deduction for everybody who has.
So that
'Cause you're-
3% is,
You're not saying change employee, I mean, that's standard for towns pretty much everywhere that I hear of. You're
Yeah.
saying the people who have extra. So
Yeah.
the increase total was 3% for BCBS.
good point. Yes, I'm talking about family, the family side. And I understand that,
But so the increase, employees increase went up also.
Okay.
So you'd be taking those 10 people and making them pay for everybody.
so I agree. So I'm not talking about, not talking about employee, cover that 100%. Families need to be adjusted.
I guess my position on this is that we've been discussing the budget. We knew that the insurance costs were in there, and that at this late date, I think we need to have a little bit more deliberation and know exactly what the numbers are. And I would just say that I would be in favor of looking at this at next year's budget, but for the budget that we're going to vote on in whatever, 5 days, 6 days, whatever it is, that I don't think we can really do this justice. Consider, and tell somebody that they could get a 3% raise, but that whole raise could be wiped out by, now they have to assume the full cost of their health benefits. I don't think we've given them proper notice, and I don't think we've given it due deliberation. So I would just, my position on this would be to leave it as is, not change it in the budget, and to give it some consideration. We could have raised this issue, as David said, he got little input from anybody on these issues. We could have we could have raised some of these issues earlier on during the process. So out of fairness, I think it should just stay the way it is.
I agree with Mike on this one. I would like to see us have a real plan in place for next year that is not just that is moving forward, that we do this. If we'd have done this a month ago, that there would have been better planning capability. We don't even really understand the full thing by our very questions. We see we don't understand how it's done to begin with. So either we have a meeting to really understand it and then make a decision that is fair, it's still going to be last minute, or put it into next year as we will review benefits compensation and come to a long-term plan.
We've kicked this can down the road a number of years, and it's 80-20. It's pretty, I agree, it needs to happen as well. But I'll tell you, if that happens, then if you want to, then you're talking about a much, much bigger increase for the family side than what 3% is going to be.
Well,
And
again.
it's not even 3%, because part of the 3% is
Yeah,
the employees that we're going to pick up.
Again, this would be a long-term plan, okay? This wouldn't be a one-year adjustment. It would be a long-term plan, which is basically what, when I spoke to at our educational course, the discussion really was about when these adjustments have to be made, you have a multi-year plan to make the adjustment, and I think that is what we need to have.
Madam Attorney?
Yes.
And I'm not entirely certain the piece that was just introduced, but there may be some human resource, vested right benefit issues that need to be addressed. I'm not saying that it can be done between now and next week, but I would need to have an understanding of exactly what was being proposed so that we could make certain that we weren't depriving somebody of something that they are entitled to.
Okay, that's,
Okay, again, it's either we're going to have another discussion, we're going to defer this and set up a meeting to have a discussion, a public discussion decision, because we don't have the full information we need, and the town attorney has to review things. Or we say, okay, this is going to be a priority for us next year, and maybe we start it before the year ends.
Is there a note that's gonna go into this budget, or where do we keep that kind of a note?
Minutes.
I'm sorry, your question?
Yeah, sometimes my memory's not really all that great, and next year I may not remember this, but
I will.
where's the resource? Where's the document?
We filed it as a
Okay.
manager needs to come back to the board with this type information for discussion.
I agree.
Yeah.
okay,
I support
fair
that.
enough. Fair
So
enough.
are we okay at this point?
Yeah.
And we will address this next year and develop a long-term plan
Yes,
with the town manager.
yes.
So this stays, is that,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's far too complex to do.
Doing one day, yes. Okay, and the third and last is the decision on giving a 2-cent reduction in our property tax from 22 to 20.
So I move that we amend this budget, this ordinance, to eliminate the 2% tax reduction.
I agree, and put it in B part.
Now, we
And
have
say-
to vote.
Don't- don't-
Oh, I agree. I
We
agree.
have to vote.
Sorry, Mike, sorry.
Second,
I agree, yep,
second.
third.
Okay. Are you withdrawing your motion, sir?
No, he's
He
just
had the
doing,
right
I try
I
to,
think we had a second on it.
He had the right motion, he didn't go forward with where it went.
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Time out, I got,
Sorry.
trying to get
Just
control of
eliminate
the
the
meeting.
two
You
cents.
made a
I made the
motion.
motion and.
Did anybody second the
I
motion?
did.
Joe seconded.
Okay, all right. So you have a motion,
Call for a vote.
a second, on the table. Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
So
A little discussion.
Discussion.
Little discussion.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
Okay,
I know that I'm shoveling against the tide here, but I'll say it again. That we would not have this excess money but for the fact that the federal government gave it to us. that we would not have increased the taxes by 7 cents if we had gotten this money, or we knew that we were going to have this money in the coffers. So the way I look at it is, yes, we have pressing problems. Yes, we can always spend the money we have, but the people of the town who live here now, who pay the taxes now, who paid the taxes for the last 2 years, deserve to get their taxes reduced. And, well, I won't say what I was going to. And it's just not only clear, it's a moral issue. We're taking people's money. We talk here about $500,000 doesn't mean anything. Well, I'll tell you, it means something to the people because the people voted at the last election for the person who proposed the tax reduction, got the most votes of anybody who ran. The people who are out there who pay the taxes want that $100 in their pocket if that's what it comes to. They want that $8 in their pocket, and they don't want people sitting up here looking down their nose telling them that the $100 doesn't mean anything. So the vote
I
the
take
vote will be
offense to
taken.
that
The
comment.
vote
I
will
do
be
too.
taken.
That's
I do too.
ridiculous.
I do too. You know, there's no reason for making a statement like that,
Well-
that you just made, Mike, because that was
But-
not my, that was, I got the floor.
Okay.
I got the floor.
Ma-
I got the floor.
Well, I'm sorry, you don't have the floor.
Point of
I
order,
may have-
please. Point of order, please.
I may have used the wrong term, but we've denigrated the fact, each person has mentioned that it's merely $100 on a $500,000 home. To me, that's denigrating the taxpayer and what they have to pay. I didn't mean to offend anybody here, and if I did, I apologize.
You
for
offended
that.
me.
All right, we
apologize.
need to stick to the point and move ahead. We're gonna be here all day. Let's stick.
Yeah, so three comments. We are taking money out of the general fund to pay for that central reach, so we didn't fully fund it by that tax increase. Second, the federal government didn't give us anything. It reimbursed the money. It says reimbursement. And what was the third thing? And I've never minimized any money, for sure. And until you can adequately have a B-part fund or a general fund balance, we shouldn't give any money back because we don't have it to give back.
Well, But we do. And
No, we don't.
and I
Our
know-
general fund and
I
B-part
don't-
fund is
Can we
not.
just have a point of order here? Can we just vote?
Well, we're just
No,
discussing
no,
the
no,
discussion.
no. All right, hold it. We're getting our wheels wobbling here. As long as it's a discussion, it's fine. If you want to vote, just make a motion, call for the vote.
Yep.
You know, that's the process.
I'd said my piece, I'm good.
Okay. Have you finished yours? I call for a vote.
All right. Does everybody understand, and I hope I do, that we're voting on this one item only? Because when we started our process, we were gonna get a list and vote on the list. So, but we're not voting on the list, we're voting on the one item,
Correct.
and that's the 2 cents. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Removing the 2 cents.
If removing the motion is to
Removing the 2
remove the
cents.
2-cent reduction.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
Okay, it's 3-2, Madam Clerk. Okay,
Now we need to address where the 2% goes.
I propose, since it's related to B-part, we put it back into the sand fund, which is in the B-part. Which we didn't put anything in this year, except for the transfer of the 3 million.
And did I understand correctly that we can do this?
If your general fund balance is 70%.
Our general fund balance is not at 70%, so are we precluded from putting it in the sand fund the way we wrote the rules?
We can't put it in a sand fund if our,
It's-
Per your guidance, and when you made the sand fund, I'll have to find the exact wording, but it says, I'll find it.
I've got it here. Your policy says that it's policy of the town of Holden Beach to maintain a minimum of 40% and a maximum of 70% of unassigned fund balance in the general fund.
The beach, the fund that you're talking about, the capital reserve fund, the beach, and the new fund that you guys made, you said the sources will include an initial $3 million transfer from the B Park fund. Subsequent amounts may be sourced from the general fund pending fund balance reserves reaching above 70% per the town's general fund balance policy or the B Park special reserve fund.
But that's the proposed ordinance. It has not been adopted yet.
Yeah, and if you
Okay.
read that, it's from the general fund into, we're not talking about taking down the general fund, are we? We're just talking about redirecting
Okay.
that
Well,
2 cents.
that's what we need to do, and I can tell you in just a moment what your effect will have on your fund balance, if you'll just give me a minute.
Got a 5-minute recess, because we're not gonna get out of here for another 2 hours, I don't believe. Give David a chance to.
Thank you.
Please.
So busy on
Yeah, you can't take anything else.
It's been 6 minutes, I think.
It's gonna be a 24-hour job.
All right, Mr. Hitt, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. I just, to reiterate, because yes, the fund balance policy is established as a range, but in the policy, it reads, it gives you some soft corners in there. It says, evaluate the estimated unassigned general fund revenues available at the year end for appropriation in the subsequent year in order to ascertain